Oh yeah, what up? What we do, excuse me, it's in English. Excuse me.
Lawsuit y Artificial Intelligence Lawsuit Lost News, Google Search. As of early 2026, the legal landscape regarding artificial intelligence is experiencing an intense surge in litigation. Lawsuit AI Artificial Intelligence Lawsuit Laws News, Google Search. As of early 2026, the legal landscape regarding artificial intelligence is experiencing an intense surge in litigation, primarily focused on copyright infringement, data privacy, and antitrust issues. Major lawsuits, including a record-setting settlement, are shaping how AI companies, such as Anthropic, OpenAI, and Stability AI, are allowed to train their models. Here is a summary of the latest AI lawsuit news. Major copyright and data lawsuits. Anthropic's $1.5 billion settlement. Anthropic agreed to a massive $1.5 billion settlement to resolve a class action lawsuit filed by authors alleging their books were used to train the Claude AI. Musk's AI sues OpenAI and Apple. Elon Musk's AI startup, Xi, filed a lawsuit accusing Apple and OpenAI of conspiring to monopolize the AI market and violating antitrust law. AI in the courts in 2025. Plus End 1082, plus chat BTN underscore tooltip underscore text plus. Asterisk doc, get lemon beard widget fountain, style, color equals color, doc, get lemon beard widget fountain, style, background color equals MSG, widget color. Doc, email localization, get value MSG, widget underscore lang, badge underscore counter underscore unread underscore messages, live chat BTN underscore badge underscore chat BTN underscore badge underscore counter, doc, get lemon beard widget fountain, add event list and click. AI copyright battles enter pivotal year as US courts weigh fair use. Reuters. January 5. Reuters. The sprawling legal fight over tech companies' vast copying of copyrighted material to train their artificial intelligence systems could be entering a decisive phase in 2026. After a string of fresh lawsuits and a landmark settlement in 2025, the new year promises to bring a wave of rulings that could define how US copyright law applies to generative AI. At stake is whether companies like OpenAI, Google, Open's new tab, and Meta, Open's new tab, can rely on the legal doctrine of fair use to shield themselves from liability, or if they must reimburse copyright holders, which could cost billions. Jumpstart your morning with the latest legal news delivered.
Okay, how does it come to the conclusion to fuck it all out? To understand what the conclusion is going to be debated, to the dialogue that it's going to be at, and fuck you up. You know what I mean? How do you complete that? Anything.
Straight to your inbox from the Daily Docket newsletter. Sign up here. The conflict escalated sharply last year. The New York Times, Disney and other major copyright holders filed new lawsuits. And authors secured $1.5 billion Australian dollars class action settlement. With Anthropic, the largest known copyright payout in US history. For the first time, federal judges also began deciding whether generative AI training qualifies as fair use, which allows limited, unauthorized use of copyrighted.
See what he's saying? Saying all that. says uncertainly in both copyright holder and detect. Wow, yeah.
Material in certain circumstances, the early rulings were mixed, underscoring the uncertainty for both copyright holders and the tech industry. Divided rulings. The defendants in nearly all cases have argued that their AI systems make fair use of copyrighted material by transforming it into something new. In June, U.S. District Judge William Alsup in San Francisco called for AI training quintessentially transformative, siding with the company on a key fair use factor. Copyright law seeks to advance original works of authorship, not to protect authors against competition, he wrote. But Alsup also found the company liable for storing millions of pirated books in a central library, not tied to training, a move that exposed Anthropic to potential liability of up to $1 trillion before it settled in December. 2 days later, Judge Vince Chabria, also in San Francisco, ruled for Meta in a similar case but warned that AI training, in many circumstances, would not qualify as fair use. He voiced concern that generative AI could flood the market with content, undermining incentives for human creators, a core purpose of copyright law. Also dismissed fears of market harm, likening them to complaining that training school children to write well creates competition. Chabria, by contrast, saw generative AI as a potential existential threat to creative markets. What's next? More hearings are scheduled for or are likely to be held in 2026 over disputes involving Anthropic and music publishers, Google and visual artists, Stability AI, and iMusic Generator. New rulings could clarify how fair use applies to AI or deepen the uncertainty, and could help determine whether AI companies will enjoy broad fair use protections or face a licensing regime that reshapes the economics of the industry. In the meantime, some major copyright owners have agreed to licensing deals with AI-focused tech companies, charting a more cooperative path to resolving these disputes. In addition to Anthropic's landmark class action settlement, Disney in December agreed to invest $1 billion in OpenAI to allow the startup to use Disney characters in its Sora AI video generator. Warner Music also settled its lawsuits against AI music makers Suno and Udio and agreed to launch joint music creation platforms with them in 2026. Thomson Reuters, the parent company of Reuters News, licensed Reuters content to Meta for its AI systems in 2024. Thomson Reuters is also involved in an ongoing copyright dispute with former legal research competitor Ross Intelligence over the alleged misuse of material from Thomson Reuters Westlaw in AI training. Reporting by Blake Ridden in Washington. Our standards, the Thomson Reuters Trust Principles. Opens new tab. Blake Ridden reports on intellectual property law, including patents, trademarks, copyrights and trade secrets, for Reuters Legal. He has previously written for Bloomberg Law and Thomson Reuters Practical Law and practiced as an attorney. AI is creeping into our court system. Will it undermine justice? ABC News. Lawyers are already using AI. Will judges be next? Artificial intelligence is coming for the law. Are we ready for robots to become judge and jury? When Chief Justice Andrew Bell started practicing as a lawyer in 1995, urgent documents were communicated via fax. Invoices were noted in a paper spiral-bound notebook and unreported cases could only be found in hard copy at the library. His laptop wasn't even connected to the internet. 3 decades later, Bell sits in a Sydney office atop the state's Supreme Court making the case for which remaining parts of the legal process should be carried out by humans rather than robots. There are some things that AI can't do, and which it is desirable it doesn't do, Bell, who is now the highest-ranking judicial officer in New South Wales, tells the ABC. Anxiety about the creep of artificial intelligence into court systems across the world reflects a deeper concern that the use of these tools could erode Australia's core judicial values. These are the principles we have historically held dear as a society to make sure that everyone is equal before the law and our judiciary is independent and accountable. Justice can often elude those without enough cash or information, while those who are lucky enough to pursue it find a system buckling under its own bureaucracy, riddled with distressing delays and confusing processes. It can be an expensive and unsatisfactory experience. Try as they might, humans make inconsistent and subjective decisions. A towering figure in British legal history. Elizabethan and Jacobean era jurist Sir Edward Coke once said legal reasoning should be artificial, in that it should not be based on a monarch or layperson's common sense, no matter how smart they are. Half a millennium later, the legal sector is coming face to face with infinite and infinitely complicated questions about just how artificial that reasoning should be. Do these tools have the power to remove prejudice from the legal process, or are they trained on data that will just reproduce biases? If my lawyer is using AI for a chunk of their workload, will they be cheaper? If predictive software tells you you're likely to lose litigation, is that reason enough to give up? And perhaps, most important at a time when democracy feels fragile, if judges are replaced by algorithmic decision-making, will the public lose confidence in the courts? Right now the technology has its flaws, but once those are ironed out, answering these questions ultimately involves a calculation about what we feel comfortable outsourcing to a robot in the interests of time, money and the promise of objectivity, in which decisions we believe a human should be held accountable for. Lawyers are already using generative AI. Are we ready for robots to become judge and jury? Fake, outdated and misrepresented. The 2020s will be the decade during which artificial intelligence will take hold in law, leading legal scholar Richard Susskind writes in his book Tomorrow's Lawyers. The first 65 years of legal tech have generated a kind of automation in which software and digital tools are grafted onto the traditional work of lawyers. Susskind says, but by 2040 he predicts the legal profession will be changed beyond recognition. When machines today can make predictions, identify relevant documents, answer questions, and gauge emotions at a higher standard than human beings, it is not just reasonable but vital that we ask whether people or systems will be doing our legal work in decades to come. A 2024 UNESCO survey found that 44% of judicial operators, including judges, prosecutors and lawyers, across 96 countries were already using generative AI tools such as ChatGPT for work-related tasks. In Australia, law firms are reinvesting in AI tools and have done for years, whether to discover files relevant to litigation, review documents and contracts, draft advice, turn legal cases into podcast summaries they can listen to on the bus home from work, or Assan Partner described it as a cognitive sparring partner. Much of this work has been uncontroversial, but in the past couple of years there have been dozens of cases in Australia, at least 84, where generative AI produced hallucinated content, information that appears to be factual but is ungrounded. These can be fake citations but also outdated advice or misrepresented case law filed in court either by lawyers or more often by self-represented litigants. It is difficult to think of a case with higher stakes than one in which a child stands accused of murder. In August, a top Victorian silk representing a boy facing this charge, who was found not guilty by way of mental impairment, apologized after filing submissions that included AI-generated hallucinations with fictitious quotes and fantasy judgments. "We are deeply sorry and embarrassed for what occurred," the lawyer told the judge. Supreme Court Justice James Elliott said, at risk of understatement, the situation was unsatisfactory. The use of artificial intelligence without careful oversight of counsel would seriously undermine this court's ability to deliver justice. Following Queensland and Victoria, late last year Bell issued practice notes to lawyers and judges in the state providing directions on the expectations around their use of AI. Lawyers mustn't use it for affidavits, witness statements and character references, and judges shouldn't use it for primary legal research. In August, Justice Judith Gibson handed down a judgment in a civil matter in a New South Wales district court in which she called out a self-represented plaintiff for using generative AI. Unfortunately for the plaintiff, what Gibson called a reference to a wholly imaginary judgment that claimed she, the presiding judge, was the author. This is a global phenomenon. An Alabama judge in the US recently took a novel approach to reprimanding lawyers who filed fictitious case law hallucinated by AI. He gave them an ultimatum: pay thousands of dollars in monetary sanctions and be referred to the state bar, or instead write to their former law school deans and bar officials and explain their mistakes, as well as volunteer to speak on AI and professional conduct. Last month, a California attorney was fined $15,000 for filing an appeal littered with ChatGPT hallucinations. In September, a Victorian lawyer became the first in Australia to face professional sanctions for using AI in a court case after he provided the court with documents that contained false citations. Bell is concerned about the scope for these hallucinations, but also by how AI will generate apparently genuine documents, making evidence trickier to collect or defend and lending itself to a liar's dividend, in which genuine evidence may be claimed to have been digitally altered. In California, a whole case was recently thrown out after the plaintiff submitted falsified AI-generated evidence, including fake video testimonials. The integrity of the underlying data and the tendency for these tools to provide incorrect answers rather than no answer at all also concerns Bell. Recently, his colleague asked ChatGPT how Bell was perceived as a judge. Conservative, apparently. When asked to provide a source for that characterization, the bot referenced a 2023 piece in the Australian Financial Review. When pressed again, it ultimately admitted no such article using that phrase even existed. The rise of the robot judge. When it comes to the courts, the pandemic served as an unexpected pilot period in many countries, including Australia, for trialing a less human court experience. Distancing rules during COVID necessitated the uptake of remote hearings, which, language and accessibility considerations aside, proved possible. Canada has an online tribunal which was initially for small civil claims and strata disagreements but now covers other disputes like those over car accidents. Online courts, which are also found in the United States and China, can involve no hearing or oral arguments. This removes something that many people hold dear: their day in court. Bell considers, if it's a jury trial, you've got fellow citizens who absolutely are being addressed by human lawyers. And the procedure is being overseen by a human judge who's not just anyone, but who's been appointed because of his or her integrity and experience and sort of wisdom. Bell says, this is someone who has had, reposed in them, public trust and confidence to ensure that there'll be a fair trial. In 2023, Lord Justice Colin Burse, Deputy Head of Civil Justice in England and Wales, declared ChatGPT jolly useful when he used it to summarize an area of law and incorporate it into his judgment in what marked the first instance of a British judge using an AI chatbot. There are two things Bell believes should be done by human judicial officers, for now: exercising discretion to make qualitative and evaluative judgments, and finding facts. Most of what the courts do, actually, is determine disputed factual questions and work out whose version of events is correct, he says. That involves hearing evidence, assisting witnesses, reading and analyzing documents, in particular principles. But the fact-finding process is one that AI can't do effectively, at least at this point in time, Bell argues. Partly that's because in certain types of cases, it involves assessments of demeanor, assessments of credibility of witnesses, etc. The decades of experience most judges have conducting and witnessing cross-examination and reading non-verbal cues is currently no match for the existing tools. This is partly why when Sir Geoffrey Voss, a senior judge in England and Wales, said if AI was used to adjudicate some cases, we might have more confidence in its ability to do so on less intensely personal disputes like commercial or compensation cases. But advances are being made when it comes to emotional intelligence. A study released earlier this year found that large language models (LLMs) like ChatGPT, Gemini and Copilot outperformed humans in 5 emotional intelligence tests. Robots scored 81% on average and humans scored 56%. The creep of artificial intelligence has broadened just how virtual courts could become. In China, AI technologies have been applied in the country's smart courts, where courthouse officials are reportedly using DeepSeek to draft legal judgments within minutes. A recent study of a court in Shenzhen examined how judges were using LLMs to generate judicial opinions and found it may amplify errors and biases in judicial decision-making by reinforcing judges' prior beliefs. Bell says there are considerations for accountability. Australia has an appellate safety net, the ability to challenge and appeal the decisions of a judge or jury, in which the decisions made by humans are open to scrutiny and revision. They're all important features which add legitimacy to the criminal justice system, he says. Adding that AI could eat away at those human elements of the process. Law's existential crisis. Kimberly Weatherall, law professor and chief investigator with the ARC Center of Excellence for Automated Decision-Making and Society, says while law firms have gone all in on the technology, most people in the legal community are very emphatic that judging is a you have this unstoppable force of all of this in the legal profession then meeting that potentially immovable object of the courts, Weatherall says. Adding that AI could require a higher fact-checking workload as highlighted by the increase in hallucinations. It worries me because no one is proposing to appoint more judges, Weatherall says. When you're looking at the court system, truth, accuracy, integrity, transparency, explainability, they're basically existential for the courts. If the courts can't get that right, then you know that completely undermines not just their reputation, but sort of their reason for existing. Lyria Bennett Moses has thought deeply about how the use of AI will impact the trust and faith people have in the legal process and the philosophy of equality before the law. Process matters. It matters that a judge is a human who, if they had committed, or someone they love had committed, the same crime, would be subject to the same logic of punishment by a similar judge in a similar courtroom, she says.
Alright.
That would be subject to the same logic of punishment. Process matters. It matters that a judge is a Danish PM faces Iraq war lawsuit, ABC News. A group of 24 Danes have filed suit against Danish Prime Minister Anders Fogh Rasmussen over the Scandinavian
News, mixed news, mixed news, mixed news. We're going through the mixed news. Understanding mixed news, mixed news, mixed news. Pussy cunt.
Scandinavian countries' role in the Iraq war. In a 74-page document submitted to a Copenhagen district court, the plaintiffs, including professors, doctors, lawyers, union leaders and politicians, argue that the Danish government's
Man up, pussy cunt, pussy cunt, pussy cunt. El gato loco.
government's decision to go to war in Iraq was unconstitutional. Denmark was one of the original members of the US-led coalition that invaded Iraq in March 2003 and has remained a loyal US ally. It currently has around 530 soldiers operating in southern Iraq under British command. One of the two lawyers representing the group, Bjorn Elmquist, says the lawsuit targets Mr. Rasmussen as the representative of the state for the government's and parliament's illegal decision on March 21, 2003 to pursue a war of aggression against Iraq. The group claims that the right-leaning coalition government violated Article 19 of the Danish constitution, which authorizes the state only to engage in an act of war to defend itself against a foreign aggressor, or when there is a United Nations mandate. Denmark had not been attacked in 2003 and none of its NATO allies had been either, Mr. Elmquist said. And the argument that weapons of mass destruction could have hit Western Europe in 45 minutes to justify such an intervention is wrong. In addition, the act of going to war cannot be justified under the Constitution since it was not approved by the UN and was not preceded by UN Security Council resolution. Mr. Rasmussen is currently traveling in Africa, but Foreign Minister Per Stig Møller says he expects the Copenhagen court to throw out the case. The courts have to decide if they want to take on this case. But several lawyers have said they don't expect them to. And besides, Denmark's decision to go to war was taken by a majority in parliament. Danish news agency Ritzau quoted him as saying, while Mr. Rasmussen is a US ally, a large proportion of the Danish public opposes the war in Iraq. A poll published in August showed that 47.9% of Danes want Denmark to pull out of Iraq, while 38.6% were in favor of remaining. AFP.
Right. So Denmark might pull out. Good on ya. Mixed news, mixed news, mixed news.
Judge backs Fox on rights to superhero movie, ABC News. 20th Century Fox will seek an injunction to block release of the Warner Brothers movie Watchmen after a Los Angeles court ruled a copyright lawsuit against Warner can go forward. The movie about raffish, flawed superheroes, which has already been shot, is slated for release on March 6, said Warner Brothers spokesman Scott Rowe. The highly anticipated film, with a budget believed to be about $120 million United States dollars, is based on a 1980s DC Comics graphic novel written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Dave Gibbons. In his decision released last week, U.S. District Court Judge Gary Fayes wrote that Fox could hold some of the rights to the material, even if it did not hold all rights. Fox argues it acquired motion picture rights to the Watchmen graphic novel in the 1980s, and that even though it relinquished certain rights to the material in 1991, it held onto the right to distribute the first movie. We will be asking the court to enforce Fox's copyright interests in the Watchmen and enjoin the release of the Warner Brothers film and any related Watchmen media that violate our copyright interests in that property, said Fox spokesman Greg Brilliant. The Watchmen is directed by Zack Snyder, who made the 2007 hit movie 300. The film is based on edgy material and takes an unorthodox approach to the superhero movie by focusing on flawed anti-heroes. Mr. Rowe said the ruling only means that the case will go forward. The judge did not opine at all on the merits, other than to conclude that Fox satisfied the pending requirements, Mr. Rowe said. We respectfully disagree with Fox's position and do not believe they have any rights in and to this project. Judge Fierce's ruling was issued on Wednesday, in response to Warner Brothers' request to have the case dismissed. Warner Brothers made the request after Fox sought an injunction against release of Watchmen. Fox filed its lawsuit against Warner Brothers in February. Fox's accusations against its rival studio included copyright infringement, interference with contract and breach of contract. Reuters.
So Warner Brothers say? Let's see about that.
Vaccine developer gives evidence during Warren Treadray's unfair dismissal hearing, ABC News. An Adelaide vaccine developer has told a court even a completely vaccinated workplace would not stop the transmission of COVID-19 in the unfair dismissal.
Yeah, that's a vaccine, or whatever.
Dismissal. Case of former Channel 9 presenter Warren Treadray. Key points. Warren Treadray claims he was unfairly dismissed by Channel 9. He is suing the network for almost $6 million. An Adelaide vaccine developer says COVID transmission would still happen at a workplace with employees fully vaccinated. JB Hi-Fi facing lawsuit over extended warranties allegedly offering the same rights you get for free, ABC News. If you're standing at the counter about to fork out thousands of dollars for the latest flat-screen television, you want to know if it suddenly breaks, you'll be covered. Chances are it won't be long before sales staff spruik the benefits of paying a little bit extra for an extended warranty. But is an extended warranty worth the extra cash? That's a question being raised in a new class action against retail giant JB Hi-Fi. New lawsuit on extended warranty sold by JB Hi-Fi. JB Hi-Fi is one of the country's best-known retailers, with sales at its Australian stores topping $6.5 billion last financial year. The lawsuit from Maurice Blackburn alleges JB Hi-Fi has been selling extended warranties which are worthless or of little value since 2011. What we're alleging in the class action is that JB Hi-Fi has been selling extended warranties that essentially offer Australian consumers the same thing as what they already get for free under the Australian consumer law, Miranda Nagy, principal lawyer for Maurice Blackburn, said. The case was lodged in the Victorian Supreme Court on Friday and seeks compensation for customers who signed up for extended care, customer care, or extra care plans. What do consumer laws cover to protect customers? Central to the case will be basic legal rights called consumer guarantees that you get when buying a product. That includes the right to get a repair, replacement, or refund if there's a problem within a reasonable period of time after purchase, even after a manufacturer's warranty has expired. What are your rights as a consumer if you don't buy an extended warranty? Products you buy must be of an acceptable quality. That means they must be safe, lasting, with no faults, look acceptable, and work as expected. If the product doesn't meet those standards, you may have the right to a repair, replacement, or refund. Businesses are required to provide these guarantees, regardless of any other warranties. Under Australian consumer law, the product must be of acceptable quality, not have defects, be safe, durable, and fit for purpose. The lawsuit claims JB Hi-Fi broke the law by using misleading or deceptive conduct or unconscionable conduct when selling the extended warranties. Ms. Nagy said she believed the retailer had misled shoppers about their value. JB Hi-Fi's warranties never lasted more than 3 to 6 years after the date of purchase, she said. So when you think about buying, for example, a $2,000 fridge, you're expecting a fridge like that to have a much longer life than 6 years. Australian consumer law remedies were likely to last longer in most cases. Ms. Nagy estimated the class action could cover hundreds of thousands of customers who had paid millions of dollars for extended warranties, some of which she said were incredibly expensive. And while this case is focused solely on JB Hi-Fi, Ms. Nagy said JB Hi-Fi was very far from being the only retailer. Has JB Hi-Fi? When contacted by the ABC, JB Hi-Fi declined to comment on the case. The wording of extended warranties sold by JB Hi-Fi state that they do offer benefits which are not already available to consumers. One stated the warranty provided certainty as to the period of coverage and the remedy you will receive. Other examples provided in JB Hi-Fi's brochures tout additional protection against mechanical and electrical failure. Maurice Blackburn's case alleges some brochures failed to include important information about how the basic consumer law protections compared to those offered by extended warranties. Among the key details it is claimed JB Hi-Fi did not make clear the right of the customer, not JB Hi-Fi, to choose a remedy in certain situations. Cover for some defects. The right to a monetary refund, not just store credit. What the consumer groups say. Margaret Rafferty from Consumer Group Choice said extended warranties, very rarely, offered value for money. Last year, Choice did a mystery shop of 80 JB Hi-Fi, Harvey Norman and the Good Guys stores and found most sales staff were misrepresenting consumer rights. Do you know more about how businesses market and sell extended warranties? Contact specialist.team@abc.net.au. In 71% of cases they misrepresented the rights of a mystery shopper about what would happen if a product broke down and used the opportunity to try and sell us an extended warranty, she said. They gave us excuses such as, if it's over 2 years, you have to pay for repairs yourself. That's not right. They told us that, after a manufacturer's warranty, there's nothing we can do. That's incorrect. It was really quite shocking to see how poorly the rights of consumers were represented by the salespeople. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission ACCC said people should be aware that a business or salesperson could get a commission for selling you an extended warranty and consumer guarantees applied regardless of any warranties. What do retailers say? Paul Zara from the Australian Retailers Association has defended the value of extended warranties. Many shoppers prefer extended warranty just purely for the peace of mind, Mr. Zara said. Extended warranties can often add longer life to a product. He said retailers needed to make explicitly clear what extra rights they were offering. There's no doubt if there's a crossover between consumer law or manufacturer's law and the extended warranty is just restating that, then that's not really in the spirit of actually an extended warranty, he said. JB Hi-Fi Group, which also owns the Good Guys, declined to comment. In a statement to the stock exchange this morning, JB Hi-Fi's chairman Stephen Goddard said, JB Hi-Fi takes compliance with its legal obligations very seriously and considers that it has complied with relevant laws at all times. JB Hi-Fi intends to vigorously defend the proceedings. When contacted for comment, Harvey Norman said it was unable to provide a considered response to the claims made by Choice by the ABC's deadline. What are your rights as a customer? Ms. Rafferty from Choice said your entitlement to get a faulty product fixed without having an extended warranty would depend on a number of factors including whether it was a reasonable period of time, which varies depending on the product, how expensive it was and crucially, how serious the fault is. If you have a minor problem, something that can be quickly and easily fixed, the retailer can decide to repair or replace your product, she said. But if it's a major problem, for example if the product is unsafe, if it doesn't do what it should or it has a fault that would have prevented you from buying it, if you'd known about it, you're entitled to your money back. Her advice to people was to know your rights before buying online or in-store, and if you were considering an extended warranty, ask lots of questions. Really drill down to ask questions about what this product gives that they aren't already covered by, she said. Ask them if you'll have to pay any extra if you make a claim, find out about the limits on the claim, ask about who's providing the extended warranty. Be really wary of the tactics that the retailers will use, the extra pressure they put on you to convince you you'd need it. Do you have more to share about this story? N News is Militar Australia Government Sales EU, Google search. As of early 2026, the Australian government is undertaking the largest peacetime investment in its military since World War II, focusing heavily on upgrading northern bases and boosting maritime and air capabilities. Here are the key details regarding Australia's military news and government sales. Major defence upgrades. Over $2.8 billion has been invested since 2022 to strengthen the Australian Defence Force's ADF presence in Northern Australia, including a $355 million upgrade to RAF Base Tyndall. Massive procurement. The government is focusing on acquiring advanced capabilities, including 48 HIMARS high-mobility artillery rocket systems in a deal potentially worth $705 million United States dollars. Military Sales Office AMS.
They're updating Okay, they are updating the system and everything like that, but you have to remember we have to abide by law by the Americans because they are our ally. They speak English, we speak English. We have to support one another, help one another in case of war.
The Australian Military Sales Office facilitates government-to-government G2G and commercial-to-government C2G sales of defence equipment, supporting local industry.
It's not like lifestyle or whatever. Comfort how you want it, comfort how you get it, info it, receive it, love it.
Industry boost. The government has committed $100 million to build more Bushmaster vehicles at Thales in Bendigo, securing jobs until the end of 2026. Strategic shift. A major overhaul of the Defence Department is currently in progress, late 2025, early 2026. Albanese government turns defence sites north, completing $355 million upgrade to RAF base Tyndall, ABC News. The Albanese government is directing more defence funding into Australia's north amid growing strategic tension in the Indo-Pacific, completing a $355 million upgrade at RAF base Tyndall to support long-range surveillance drone operations. Assistant Defence Minister Peter Khalil will today announce the completion of the upgrade, allowing the Northern Territory base to support MQ-4C Triton remotely piloted aircraft used for maritime surveillance and expanding defensive coverage across Australia's northern approaches. The Triton fleet will be based at RAF base Tyndall in the NT and operated remotely by the newly reformed No. 9 Squadron at RAF base Edinburgh in South Australia. The capability flying out of Tyndall is really quite significant, Mr. Khalil told the ABC. We'll have 4 of the Tritons in total. The first arrived in 2024, 2 in mid-2025. They're remotely piloted from Edinburgh in South Australia but flown from the Northern Territory. Mr. Khalil said the aircraft were not armed but would play a critical role in maritime surveillance and monitoring shipping routes amid growing strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific. They're not armed, don't have strike capability but have amazing range, he said. 24-hour flight time, about 600 kilometers an hour at top speed. The upgrade follows priorities outlined in the 2023 Defence Strategic Review, which placed a high emphasis on strengthening and hardening northern bases. The works include purpose-built hangars, working accommodation and upgraded airfield pavements. The work they do around maritime surveillance is critically important, Mr. Khalil said. When you tie it up to strategic imperatives, ensuring sea lanes are not impeded in any way, it gives us a really good sense of the movement, the trade that goes through. He said remote piloting enabled long endurance that could not be achieved by crewed platforms. You can't have a pilot doing 24 hours in a go, Mr. Khalil said. The remotely piloted element allows that longer flight time. These are critically important tasks for our men and women in uniform. Government flags defence estate sell-off. The announcement comes as the government prepares to flag changes to the defence estate, following an audit of the ADF's sprawling 3 million hectare property portfolio that has been under consideration for almost 2 years. I think if you read the Defence Strategic Review, an important element is upgrading all of the bases and all of the estate to make it fit for purpose for the strategic challenges we're facing and ensuring the security and stability of our region, Mr. Khalil said. Mr. Khalil, who has responsibility for defence properties, said the government was laser-focused on ensuring defence reflected modern needs and benefited the taxpayer. Quite frankly, we can't be spending taxpayer dollars on bases where there are abandoned buildings or sprawling golf courses or manicured lawns, he said. The taxpayer dollar has got to be ensuring these bases are fit for purpose for the modern challenges we face today and into the future. And there are tough decisions to be made there. ABC News understands an announcement on the sale of defence property is imminent. Port of Darwin questions remain. The strengthening of northern defence infrastructure has again raised questions over the Port of Darwin, which both the Albanese government and the coalition promised to return the port to Australian hands at last year's election, but 8 months later, no deal or timeline has been finalised. Mr. Khalil told the ABC the shift was underway. The National Security Committee has gone through this particular issue and there'll be announcements made from the government when the time is right, he said. That's currently underway in terms of assessments being made by the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister and the National Security Committee. Trump focus elsewhere. How much did the Darwin shiplift cost? Google search. The Darwin shiplift project cost has experienced significant blowouts, with the estimated cost as of late 2025 reaching $820 million. Up from initial 2015 projections of $100 million. The project is primarily funded by the Northern Territory government, including a $300 million loan from the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility. Darwin shiplift project cost blowout rivaling Snowy 2.0, economist says, ABC News. On Darwin Harbour sits a construction project that has so far taken 10 years, blown out by hundreds of millions of dollars, and is not predicted to be finished by its 2027 deadline. Now, Northern Territory government sources have told the ABC the cost to taxpayers of the Darwin shiplift may hit more than $1 billion in coming years, a far cry from the $100 million first pledged in 2015. The beleaguered shiplift project, which is currently budgeted at $820 million, has been branded one of the biggest infrastructure blowouts in Australia's recent history. And while contract details are tied up in secret cabinet in confidence documents, it has also been made public that the shiplift will not deliver any direct revenue to the NT government. The project will be operated for profit by Australia's largest polling company, Pauline Group. Former NT Labor MLA Scott McConnell said the arrangement raised alarm bells. It is not in the interest of Territorians, it is not in the interest of Australians, he said. This project should not proceed. This is a wholly publicly funded project that will benefit private individuals. The original $100 million pledged by the Giles Country Liberal Party CLP government for the shiplift was a grant to get the project off the ground and attract more funding from private business. But in 2019, the Gunner Labor government committed to self-funding the shiplift, later that year securing a $300 million federal government loan to develop the facility. Independent economist Saul Eslake said the 8 to 10-fold increase in the funding committed by the NT government since 2015 would have few peers anywhere else in the world. It would be one of the biggest blowouts in the cost of any infrastructure project proportional to its starting point that I can remember, he said. Mr. Eslake compared the shiplift to the enormous cost blowouts of a Snowy 2.0 energy project in NS1, the proposal for a new AFL stadium in Hobart. The number of dollars is obviously smaller than Snowy 2.0, but the multiple, which is the more relevant way of thinking about it, is proportionally a much bigger increase, he said. The shiplift is being constructed by joint venture partnership Clough BMD. Clough is also heading up the Snowy 2.0 project and went into voluntary administration in 2022. Doubts over costs, deadline not blowing out further. Chief Minister Leah Finocchiaro has not publicly confirmed speculation the cost of the shiplift could balloon further than its current $820 million budget, but has not ruled it out. Oh gosh, we certainly hope not, she told ABC Radio Darwin. This has already been a catastrophic increase. Pauline Group Executive Director James Pauline has told an ongoing Public Accounts Committee inquiry into the project he was not confident it would be finished by its March 2027 deadline. It would be fair to say we have a high level of skepticism about the dates that we've been given. Until we are notified under our contract of a completion date, he told the inquiry. Pauline Group declined to comment further to the ABC, citing confidentiality obligations. Mr. McConnell cast much of the blame for the shiplift project's long delay to get off the ground on his former Labor government, which failed to produce a business case. The Labor cabinet often told us, now we can't disclose that because it's commercial in confidence, he said of the shiplift deal's details. It's not commercial in confidence, it's commercial incompetence. Costs from shiplift to be added to NT debt. Construction costs for the shiplift project are set to be added to the NT spiralling debt, which is already on its way towards $14 billion. The highest per capita in Australia. Mr. Eslake said the NT government would struggle to ever pay off the growing debt burden, and an extra $1 billion added to the bill from the shiplift would not help. It's going to be very difficult. I mean, the Northern Territory has already accumulated a very large debt as a proportion of the territory's economy, or per head of its population, he said. Although the shiplift will not produce any direct revenue for the government, there are hopes it will eventually have significant knock-on benefits for the region's marine industry. Northtrack Machinery Director Darren Dewell said the sustainability of his business into the future would hinge on the shiplift becoming operational. I've put my working life, after my previous job, to align to the defense industry, this shiplift and the marine industry, he said. It's gotta happen. It's just gotta happen. In a statement, a spokesperson for Treasurer Bill Yarn said, the CLP government continues to support the shiplift. This project will see long-term benefits for the territory with 250 workers likely employed at the peak of construction and hundreds of ongoing jobs created in the maritime support sector when completed in 2027, the spokesperson said. The government is waiting for the review of the shiplift by the Public Accounts Committee to determine how best to proceed. The committee is expected to deliver its findings by the end of October.
Oh, it's finished. It's finished. That's what it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Darwin shiplift project cost blowout rivaling Snowy 2.0, economist says, ABC News. On Darwin Harbour sits a construction project that has so far taken 10 years, blown out by hundreds of millions of dollars, and is not predicted to be finished by its 2027 deadline. Now, Northern Territory government sources have told the ABC the cost to taxpayers of the Darwin shiplift may hit more than $1 billion in coming years, a far cry from the $100 million first pledged in 2015. The beleaguered shiplift project Subscribe to NT News. CLP to introduce strongest penalty for DV murder in Australia. The Northern Territory government will increase the non-parole period for domestic violence murders, forcing perpetrators to spend more time behind bars than other killers. All your news for a great price. Unlock this story and more with your subscription. Unlimited articles on app and web. Subscriber exclusive newsletters. A digital version of today's paper. Enjoy games and puzzles. Supercoach Plus. Pay as you go. No. $4 a week for 12 weeks. $16. Read the fine print. Renewals occur unless cancelled as per full terms and conditions. Not in conjunction with any other offer. New customers only. Prices after any early discounted periods may be varied as per full terms and conditions. siwa.ntnews.com.au/subscription terms for full details. 12. Lock in and save. Darwin Shiplift Project NAIF. NAIF's $300 million loan to the Northern Territory government will enable the construction of a new shiplift and associated marine infrastructure in Darwin Harbour. This project will consolidate Darwin's position as a hub for marine maintenance and servicing in Northern Australia. Contractual close on the deal was announced in November 2020.
I've listened this Darwin to China for 99 years or every 10 years supported, or how are they thinking that Australia got no way of getting it back? It's just giving it to China now and they won. And they own it, they need it. And how it works, you have to help them create more money. It costs a lot of money. It's troublemaker China. But we have to live with it. We said their opponent, and we give out their list. President Bikua or Bakelia. China win anyway.
November 2020. Project overview. A loan of $300 million from NAIF will go to the Northern Territory Treasury Corporation towards the overall $515 million project cost. The Northern Territory government will contribute the remaining $215 million. The Northern Territory government will contribute a loan of Darwin Shiplift Project NAIF. NAIF's $300 million loan to the Northern Territory government will enable the construction of a new shiplift and associated marine infrastructure in Darwin Harbour. This project will consolidate Darwin's position as a hub for marine maintenance and servicing in Northern Australia. Contractual close on the deal was announced in November 2020. Project overview. A loan of $300 million from NAIF will go to the Northern Territory Treasury Corporation towards the overall $515 million project cost. The Northern Territory government will contribute the remaining $215 million. The shiplift will be situated on Northern Territory government land in the East Arm precinct of Darwin Harbour and will be operated.
Whoa, I went too far. Oh.
How much did the Darwin shiplift cost? News Darwin Government News, Google search. 18 hours ago, originally costed at $100 million when first announced in 2017-18, the project price has ballooned by more than 800% on initial projections. With additional, 1 day ago, the complex would incorporate the NT government's troubled $820 million.
It's costing more money now. Won't leave China. Oh, China.
$820 million shiplift project, earmarked as a service hub for marine vessels, including defence. 9 hours ago, it's years behind schedule, with a record budget blowout, but the Finikiaro government is promising the Darwin shiplift will be delivered. With the help, Subscribe to NT News. Hundreds of feral camels culled after causing chaos in Outback Town. Hundreds of feral camels have been culled in Central Australia after they caused chaos in a remote NT town, leaving residents to pick up the pieces. Read the latest. All your news for a great price. Unlock this story and more with your subscription. Unlimited articles on app and web. Subscriber exclusive newsletters. A digital Nightmare on Martin Place's RBA outlines horror interest rate scenario, ABC News. Would you like to hear the good news or the bad news? The good news is the economy ended 2025 in relatively good shape, with growth starting to pick up, the economy transitioning away from government-led spending, all while maintaining a historically strong jobs market. Unfortunately, that's where it ends. The bad news is that, even after today's rate hike, the latest forecasts from the Reserve Bank of Australia are
No. Oopa. Calm down. If you do good, try harder or ask the questions, the right information, the input that you get, you will get reply 10 days faster, 1 day faster, more into the speed of light, more better than that. Your brain's a bit better. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Say thank you to those ones that are there that did the job today. Thank you for those workers. Thank you for those people. Thank you for everything. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
RBA describe a scenario in which inflation gathers. Payson, if market expectations for 2 or more rate hikes come to fruition, things could turn ugly. It's a future outlined in the quarterly statement of monetary policy, which foreshadows a sharp downturn in growth, plunging household consumption, an evaporation of dwelling investment and a steady rise in unemployment through to mid-2028. Even then, inflation wouldn't be entirely vanquished. Follow the day's events and insights from our business reporters on the ABC News Live Markets blog. According to the latest forecasts, underlying inflation would remain a problem until midway through next year and would really only be in the RBA's comfort zone by early 2028. There's an odd quirk to these quarterly crystal ball gazing exercises from our central bank. Like all economic forecasts, they're built upon a maze of assumptions about what the future may hold. One of those assumptions is the direction and size of interest rate movements. Naturally, the RBA wouldn't plug in its own estimates, or it could be accused of flagging future rate moves. Instead, it plugs in the average interest rate forecasts from money markets. Essentially, it uses the guesswork from outsiders about what it might do in the future to predict a future that will dictate how it will determine interest rates, round and round and round. Little wonder the forecasts are notoriously unreliable. If you're looking for a silver lining, that's another way of saying they are consistently, in fact, almost always, wrong. 2025, the good old days. First, the rear view. The economy ended 2025 in much stronger shape than the RBA expected. Growth picked up at a much faster clip than previously anticipated, and the jobs market remained robust. While the official numbers are yet to land, our central bank expects GDP to come in at 2.3% for the year, way above the previously forecast 2%. That unexpected fillip wasn't simply a result of the 3 rate cuts last year that are still working their way through the system. Household consumption was better than expected, and so too was business investment, most of which was driven by the torrent of cash pouring into data center construction. The international climate contributed to that cheerier tone, too. For all the fear and dire warnings on the impact of US President Donald Trump's trade war, which had been factored in throughout last year, the downside of America's tariffs on everything never really materialized. Instead, the artificial intelligence boom that has driven Wall Street for the past 3 years spilled over into East Asian markets, which helped drive demand for Australian exports. Combined, that helps explain the continued strength of the Australian jobs market. Higher rates may not fix the problem. And now for the not-so-pretty outlook. When it comes to inflation, even the RBA heavyweights have been taken aback by its strength. That sounds an ominous warning. Given the RBA's raison d'etre is to contain inflation, the prospect of further rate hikes seems almost inevitable. Except, and there's always an exception, much of the recent resurgence in inflation, according to RBA officials, has been driven by factors that aren't really related to excess demand. Prices for things like durable goods, which tend to fluctuate, food, and domestic travel during the Christmas break, point to a price breakout that may not persist. So, raising interest rates may have little impact on curbing that inflationary breakout. According to today's statement, underlying or trimmed mean inflation is likely to still be sitting at 3.2% at the end of this year, only slightly below its current level, and still outside the RBA's comfort zone of midway between 2 and 3%. And that is after factoring in at least 2 rate hikes. The higher interest rates will, however, have a noticeable and more immediate impact on growth. GDP is forecast to drop to 1.8% by the end of this year and to 1.6% by midway through next year. Household consumption, which has only recently recovered and is now growing at about 3.1%, is forecast to drop to 2.1% by the end of this year, while unemployment is forecast to steadily rise through to mid-2028 at about 4.6%. Why rates hit Australians harder? We may be obsessed with interest rates, but for good reason. Australia is uniquely sensitive to interest rates for 2 reasons. We are mortgaged to the hilt against real estate, and ours is among the most expensive in the world. And our banking system overwhelmingly relies upon variable rate mortgages. Even our fixed rate loans are mostly 3 years and under. In the US, the bulk of home lending is done on 30-year fixed rates. So when the US Federal Reserve raises interest rates, it has minimal impact on households and the amount of money they spend. Here, it's the opposite. A rate hike or a cut flows through almost immediately to spending. Which explains why last year's 3 cuts boosted household consumption, much to the relief of small businesses. Some economists reckon this could be an unusual move. While the RBA almost never pulls the rate lever just once, no matter which way it's heading, this time it may well be a one-and-done move. They think the mere threat of further tightening may be enough to put a lid on spending and deter future rate hikes.
Shit, fuck that.
The Rebellion Network, ABC News. Warning, video contains graphic and confronting images. See Windows version. It's raw, it's instant, and it's rocked authoritarian Iran and riveted world attention.
What's that video? No video, you have to listen to it.
The Rebellion Network, ABC News. Warning, video contains graphic and confronting images. See Windows version. It's raw, it's instant, and it's rocked authoritarian Iran and riveted world attention. It's the phenomenal new media broadcast by Iran's angry, dissenting young that's capturing a disturbing, perhaps defining collision of rebellion and repression. Digital dissent versus bullets and batons. Will the new technologies bring change in Iran? 10 years ago, foreign correspondent took its audience into the frightening world of the Basiji, Iran's oh-so-willing volunteer army of hardline enforcers. 5 years ago we reported on the developing internet underground, a growing cyber dissident subverting and challenging the authority of Iran's political and religious establishment. Some who dared to openly participate in our story were punished, even jailed. The government looked to have the measure of the dissidents. In 2009, post-election Iran has seen the unveiling of a bold and angry, highly mobile rebellion that's challenging Iran's old guard with new media, filming protests and government aggression with mobile phones, uploading the sometimes bloody and confronting images to global net transmitters like YouTube, messaging instant observations to Twitter, and keeping a concerned outside world up to the minute on the state of a secretive nation. Reporter Eric Campbell examines how this remarkable resistance evolved and what this explosive installment might mean for Iran, the Islamic world, and the West. From a highly organized new media hub of expat Iranians to Sydney, to Huffington Post's extensive, quick turnaround coverage based in the United States and onto and into the BBC's Persian language service, which has been accused by no less than Iran's supreme leader of enabling the uprising, Campbell charts and analyzes this historic phenomenon. In Sydney he witnesses the anguish of young expats as they watch what has become the uprising's defining image. The mobile phone images of Nida Sultan shot in the chest and dying on the street. In Washington we see the exceptional reach and power of the cyber resistance as Huffington Post's Nico Pitney asks his web audience in Iran for a definitive question to put to the US president, which he then puts to Barack Obama at the White House. Inside the BBC's Persia language operation we see their new media intake desk attempt to apply hard editorial tests to the seemingly endless supply of material coming in from the streets of Iran, sifting and finally airing material that passes muster. Mahsa Amini's death 1 year ago sparked Iran's women, life, freedom movement and global activism, ABC News. Ghazel Sharmad was 5 months pregnant when Iran's authoritarian regime kidnapped her father, Jamshid Sharmad, a dual Iranian-German citizen and US resident, currently on death row. Jamshid, a 68-year-old software developer and long-term resident of California, was arrested in Dubai in 2020 by Iranian authorities who claim he headed a group accused of a deadly 2008 bombing in the city of Shiraz, a charge his family strongly denies. I used to have a life before, Ms. Sharmad tells ABC News when asked about the personal toll the kidnapping and charges have had on her and her family. She has endured years of torment, each day fearing the worst for her father, who she said has advanced Parkinson's disease. Through social media posts and regular global media appearances, she has been pleading and urging Washington and Berlin to intervene in her father's case. I was a critical care nurse working in the ICU during the pandemic, and I thought that was the worst nightmare, you know. Like being pregnant in a pandemic in the ICU with COVID patients, she recalls. But in that moment, when they kidnapped my dad in front of the eyes of the world, I saw his video, he's blindfolded, swollen face, and tied up. And they're showing him being forced to confess. I was open to a completely different nightmare that I could have never imagined. And since then, it feels like I'm in a movie. The Iranian judiciary sentenced Jamshid Sharmad to death on charges of spreading corruption on earth, a verdict upheld by Iran's Supreme Court in April. News broke this week that he was about to face additional charges, but Amnesty International has condemned the trial as a sham. He's still fighting in there, and that's why we're still fighting with him, Ms. Sharmad said. The fight for Iranians and their freedom is happening globally. There will be protests around the world on September 16 to mark 1 year since the death in custody of Mahsa Jina Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish woman who was detained by morality police in Tehran for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly. Ms. Amini's death, which triggered protests across 165 cities in Iran and the global women, life, freedom movement, was a turning point for Iran and Iranians. As the Islamic Republic gets more brutal, Iranian citizens explain what are your rights to protest in Australia? Australian Human Rights Institute, Amal Nasser. Which states have criminalised protest and what forms of protest are criminalised? Human rights organisations have been increasingly critical. Link is external towards some Australian states over new legislation which seemingly targets environmental protests in the midst of a global climate crisis. There are dozens of protest regulations across many states, with 5 New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania and Victoria introducing forms of anti-protest regulation most recently. South Australia's new laws, passed just last month, increase maximum fines from $750 to $50,000 along with potential jail time and where prompted. Link is external by disruption of an oil and gas conference by protesters in early May. In the aftermath of protests, Link is external which sought to block port operations and shut down economic action to draw attention to demands for climate action. The New South Wales Parliament passed legislation. Link is external which could see protesters face up to a $22,000 fine and or prison for a maximum of 2 years. The legislation targets individuals who block major roads and new tunnels and or disrupt port operations in major ports such as Newcastle and Port Botany. In 2022, Tasmania passed anti-protest laws by way of Police Offences Amendment Workplace Protection Bill 2022 under the guise of protecting Tasmanian workers. Under these laws, any protester who obstructs a workplace during protests could face up to 12 months in prison, the Human Rights Law Centre. Link is external, reported. Community member protesting the destruction of old-growth forests on a forestry site could face a penalty of over $13,000 or 2 years in prison, and an organisation supporting members of the community to protest could be fined over $45,000. Similar laws were also passed in Victoria. Link is external. Anti-logging protesters who hinder, obstruct or interfere with timber harvesting operations can face up to 12 months in prison and or a $21,000 fine. PVC and metal pipes which are often used in protest activities are now prohibited in working sites, with additional powers provided to police to search suspect individuals who are reasonably suspicious. In 2019, on public safety grounds, Queensland passed legislation. Link is external which bans locking devices as modes of civil disobedience. These are tactics used to make it difficult for police to remove protesters and are often used by protesters to lock themselves to property and pipelines to prevent construction of environmentally harmful projects. Protesters face up to 2 years in prison and or a $6,000 fine. It was rationalized on the basis of activists lacing devices with butane canisters and other devices which were harmful for law enforcement. However, there is no evidence of the use of these devices. Does protest place workers at harm? Both Victoria and Tasmania have criminalised anti-logging protests, citing that it puts workers in harm's way. There is no available evidence. Link is external, suggesting workers are placed at risk by anti-logging protests. In fact, various unions pushed back against anti-protest laws, stating that the bill wrongly locates workplace risk in the democratic right to protest. Link is external. Is the criminalisation of protest a proportionate action for protests which seek to disrupt the economy? Professor Luke McNamara, an Australian Human Rights Institute associate and member of the Faculty of Law and Justice at UNSW Sydney, explains. The right to protest means very little if it doesn't include the
if they're protesting for the rights to protest, say, for the flag, immigration, anti-corruption, anti-government, fascist, Hi Hitler, anti-government, I don't know. Anyway, I'm drunk.
Right to disrupt. Interruption has long been at the heart of effective protest strategies. Some of the most successful and celebrated nonviolent protests in history have focused on economic disruption, from lunch counter sit-ins in the USA during the 1960s civil rights movement to economic sanctions imposed on South Africa during the 1980s in the struggle to end apartheid. As the New South Wales Supreme Court noted more than a decade ago, it is of the nature of a protest that others will be affected and that their routines will be at least ephemerally interrupted. Commissioner of Police v. Langus 2012 NSWSC 499-33. For example, the green bans. Link is external was a form of economically disruptive direct action that saved several historical sites and, most notably, the Rocks in Sydney, which at the time was to be demolished to make way for office towers. From June 1971, up until 1974, unionised workers with the New South Wales Builders Labourers Federation would halt any work associated with these developments. Ultimately, this form of direct action economically harmed developers and investors, as developments were put to a halt. Ultimately, planned development ceased, as labourers withdrew labour and communities mobilised to prevent the developments from taking place. This protected the environment and sites such as the Rocks, which the community still holds dear today. Of importance, even at the time of these bans, media outlets often declared the action as authoritarian and extreme. Link is external. Additionally, in January 1974, Link is external. Members of the union, activists and residents squatted in Victoria Street, Potts Point to halt a development.
Okay, it says a picture of squatters who are barricading themselves to the property. How does Australia compare to the other liberal democracies? Currency, several other liberal democracies, they are also attempting to water down the right to
development. The New South Wales Police conducted a raid and carried out mass evictions of squatters who were barricading themselves to the property. How does Australia compare to other liberal democracies? Currently, several other liberal democracies are also attempting to water down the right to protest, particularly in regards to environmental protests. The United States has a plethora of anti-protest legislation targeting direct action. Most recently, in the aftermath of Black Lives Matter protest movement in 2020, 8 states passed laws increasing penalties for blocking traffic, tearing down monuments and other unlawful behavior during a protest or riot. Link is external. In the aftermath of the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, whereby First Nations activists and supporters attempted to block the construction of an oil pipeline, 141 people were arrested. Link is external and faced felony charges. One of the organizers was sentenced to 8 years. Link is external in federal prison for damaging an energy facility. Throughout the protest, more than 300 people were injured. Link is external, with the ACLU describing law enforcement agencies and the National Guard as creating a militarized environment to shut down free speech. Link is external. In Canada, documents revealed police had authority to shoot Indigenous protesters. Link is external, who sought to block pipeline constructions. In fact, in the aftermath of pipeline and railway protests by Indigenous activists in 2020, the Legislative Assembly of Alberta introduced the Critical Infrastructure Defence Act. This prohibits direct action. Link is external in the form of protest, blockades and similar activities which interferes with critical infrastructure, including pipelines and mines. Overall, it is clear Australia has restricted the ability for activists and the broader community to engage in meaningful forms of protest and direct action. Across many liberal democracies, the protection of property and the economy has been given greater weight than the crucial and essential freedom to protest. Amal Nasser was the Human Rights Defender intern at the Australian Human Rights Institute for summer 2022-23. Protest and Dissent, National Library of Australia, NLA. Key topics. Our research guides will help you find and access resources and provide helpful search tips on specific subjects. Movements and topics related to protest and dissent in Australia. Penny Tweedy and Australian Information Service, Elder Vincent Lingiari of the Gurindji Language Group. Addressing the media after Prime Minister Gough Whitlam officially returns Aboriginal land at Waddy Creek. Northern Territory, the 16th of August 1975, nla.gov.au/nla.obj-138156433. Workers' Rights Movement. Find information about the Eureka Stockade, the formation of trade unions, the Cumaragunya Walk-Off, the Pilbara Strike and the Gurindji Strike Wave Hill Walk-Off. Lee Henningham, protester holding a placard that read, Melbourne, the 21st of May 2021, nla.gov.au/nla.obj-29567186007. Environmental protests. Dive into our collection about Australia's climate action protests, anti-mining protests and the Franklin Dam blockade. Jiao and Liang, the LGBTQ+ communities assemble at Light Square before at the Pride March, Adelaide, the 5th of November 2022, nla.gov.au/nla.obj-3144558245. Gender and sexuality protests. The long and ongoing fight for rights and equality for women and LGBTQ+ communities is increasingly well documented in our collections. Louis Cecilia, view over the Field of Hearts display, with Old Parliament House in background, United Nations World Refugee Day and Field of Hearts event. Canberra, 2004, nla.gov.au/nla.obj-1309434383. Civil rights movements. Find and access resources in our collection about the Aboriginal Day of Mourning, the Freedom Ride, the Aboriginal Tent Embassy protest, the Cronulla riots and the Black Lives Matter protests. Sok Hedich, a youth wearing a gas mask and a Friends of the Earth armband demonstrates against French nuclear testing in the Pacific. Adelaide 1972, NLA.obj-146,561,887. Anti-war protests. Discover collections about the nuclear disarmament movement, Vietnam War and Iraq War protests in Australia. How to search and find items. These tips will help you search for and access material from our collections. Search the catalogue. Use keywords or search by title, author or subject. Learn more about to use the catalogue. Search the catalogue now. If you are searching more broadly on the topic, start by using subject headings like Protest Movements, Australia. Social Movements, Australia. Social Change, Australia. For a specific search, start simple and choose a few distinctive words. Use words that relate to the event you are researching. Example, if you search Ballarat 1854, it will bring up results for the Eureka Stockade because this is where it took place. Remember to make sure all words are spelled correctly, otherwise no results will appear. Filter search results. Claire Williams and Aminata. Sydney protests immigration news hater speech, Google search. The 26th of January 2026, Brandon Koshel has been charged with publicly inciting hatred on the grounds of race causing fear after he made comments at an open mic. The 26th of January 2026, Brandon Koshel was denied bail after appearing virtually before the court on Tuesday on charges of publicly inciting hatred on the grounds. The Peckhurst man has been charged with publicly inciting hatred on the ground of race causing fear. He'll remain in custody until he faces court. Man charged with publicly inciting hatred at March for Australia rally. ABC News Australia. Sydney's March for Australia rally took a dark turn this afternoon with a man arrested for hate speech after ranting in favour of Nazis. Man arrested after allegedly making anti-Semitic remarks during 10 News. Prosecutors today opposed his release on bail, arguing there was a risk to community safety and a risk the 31-year-old would commit further offences. Man accused of inciting hatred at March for Australia rally faces court. ABC News Australia. A man has been arrested in Sydney accused of using hate speech aligned with neo-Nazi ideology at a March for Australia protest. Man arrested over alleged hate speech at March for Australia rally in Sydney. ABC News Australia. 7 days ago, a Sydney man alleged to have told an anti-immigration Australia Day rally that Jewish people were the greatest enemy to this nation can be. The 26th of January 2026. Police allege man charged with hate speech at Sydney protest has links to disbanded neo-Nazi group New South Wales The Guardian. Police have alleged in court that there is information online that suggests a man charged under hate speech laws after an alleged anti-Semitic comment during a speech at an anti-immigration rally yesterday has links to or may have been a member of a now disbanded neo-Nazi group. Brandon Koshel was refused bail and remanded in custody after he appeared before the New South Wales Bail Division Court on Tuesday from custody before Magistrate Daniel Convington. Koshel was charged under Section 93ZAA of the Crimes Act for publicly inciting hatred on the grounds of race after he allegedly made a series of anti-Semitic comments to a crowd at the Sydney March for Australia rally. The court heard that police have alleged in their preliminary investigation that Koshel was at the rally with known members or associates of the National Socialist Network (NSN). Police also alleged there was open source information, which the police prosecutor alleged referred to information online linking him or suggesting that he is a member of the NSN. Sign up. Breaking news email. The neo. Police allege man charged with hate speech at Sydney protest has links to disbanded neo-Nazi group New South Wales The Guardian. Police have alleged in court that there is information online that suggests a man charged under hate speech laws after an alleged anti-Semitic comment during a speech at an anti-immigration rally yesterday has links to or may have been a member of a now disbanded neo-Nazi group. Brandon Koshel was refused bail and remanded in custody after he appeared before the New South Wales Bail Division Court on Tuesday from custody before Magistrate Daniel Convington. Koshel was charged under Section 93ZAA of the Crimes Act for publicly inciting hatred on the grounds of race after he allegedly made a series of anti-Semitic comments to a crowd at the Sydney March for Australia rally. The court heard that police have alleged in their preliminary investigation that Koshel was at the rally with known members or associates of the National Socialist Network (NSN). Police also allege there was open source information, which the police prosecutor alleged referred to information online linking him or suggesting that he is a member of the NSN. Sign up. Breaking news email. The neo-Nazi group disbanded last Sunday ahead of legislation that outlaws hate groups passing federal parliament. The court heard that he was wearing a black shirt with a Celtic cross, a known neo-Nazi symbol, and allegations that during the speech he hailed Thomas Sewell, the former leader of the NSN, as well as White Australia. He also allegedly called for another figure, Joel Davis, who has been remanded in custody for allegedly sending a threatening message about independent MP Allegra Spender, to be freed from jail. Convington said before refusing Koshel's application for bail that the ideologies suggested in the fact sheet and the alleged comments made it difficult for the magistrate to determine what bail conditions could be put in place to both protect the community and protect the risk of him committing a serious offense. Jasmine Lau, a lawyer acting on behalf of Koshel, told the court that her reading of the police facts was that, given the group had now disbanded, Koshel has no ongoing affiliation with an active group and there is no ongoing risk. Lau argued Koshel should receive bail because he had a limited criminal history and no prior records of perpetrating a hate crime. She said that he went to the event alone and did not speak with anyone else, and that he had told her the Celtic symbol on his shirt was not an NSN symbol. The police prosecutor argued that no bail conditions could mitigate the risks. He told the court that public hatred towards the Jewish community in the wake of the Bondi terror attack had an unacceptable risk of endangering the community. He said the speech was performed in front of several hundred people and was live-streamed. Covington reserved his decision on whether to grant Koshel bail until midday. He said he'd like to first read the legislation that Koshel was charged under carefully. The new law was part of a controversial sweep passed through Parliament by the Minns government last February in the wake of a caravan found laden with explosives in Dural and a spate of anti-Semitic graffiti and arson attacks. It introduced new criminal offences for intentionally inciting racial hatred, with a proposed maximum penalty of 2 years imprisonment. 2 people were charged within the first 3.5 months after the laws were put in place in August. 1 had their charges withdrawn. New South Wales Police banned some individuals from entering Sydney's CBD on the 26th of January, via public safety orders. Police would not confirm the specific individuals that the public safety orders were issued to. However, former New South Wales leader of the NSN, Jack Eltis, posted to his Telegram channel last Tuesday that he had been issued an order. Assistant Police Commissioner Brett McFadden was asked on Monday if anyone was removed from the March for Australia because they had been prohibited from attending, including former National Social. All I can say is another individual has been served with a public safety order today who was removed from the event and, voluntarily, with police was escorted outside the precinct, he said. The Pacific Worker Scheme is in Australia's economic and strategic interests, but its future hinges on fixing its flaws. Peter Mayers for The Conversation.
Mixed news.
The Guardian. The Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme, PALM, is a crucial source of workers.
Mixed news. Mixed news.
Across regional Australia, about 32,000 people from 9 Pacific nations and Timor-Leste work in Australia under PALM. Over 7 months of researching the scheme, interviewing workers, employers, country liaison officers, trade union organisers, community volunteers and academics, as well as digging into the data on it, The Pacific Worker Scheme is in Australia. The Pacific Worker Scheme is in Australia's economic and strategic interests, but its future hinges on fixing its flaws. Peter Mayers for The Conversation. The Guardian. The Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme, PALM, is a crucial source of workers across regional Australia. About 32,000 people from 9 Pacific nations and Timor-Leste work in Australia under PALM. Over 7 months of researching the scheme, interviewing workers, employers, country liaison officers, trade union organisers, community volunteers and academics, as well as digging into the data on it, I didn't encounter anyone who thought it was a bad idea. But there were many calls for change to make it work better for everyone. My new report, published today, suggests where we could start. Who benefits from PALM now? PALM has short and long-term streams. Under the short-term stream, operating since 2012, workers can stay for 9 months to do seasonal jobs such as fruit picking. The long-term stream, introduced in 2018, allows for a 4-year stay. Most long-term workers are employed in meat processing. PALM is widely credited with delivering a triple win. The first win is for Pacific participants and their communities. In 2024-25, PALM workers remitted a $450 MTO their home countries, an average of $1,500 each per person per month. FEMA only bought food, paid school fees, upgraded housing and financed small enterprises. Benefits flow beyond immediate families. After working in an Australian abattoir, David John Suma returned to Vanuatu and invested $30,000 to supply clean drinking water to his remote village. The second win is for Australia's economy. Palm workers make a significant contribution to regional businesses that struggle to attract local workers. From farms to abattoirs. The third win is that palm advances Australia's strategic interests, not least by providing a counter to China's wooing of Pacific nations. Pacific leaders might wish for more aid from Canberra and be frustrated by the government's tepid action on climate change. But well-paid work is something Australia offers that China does not. Persistent problems. Yet the wins of the palm scheme have countervailing costs and the pain of separated families, loneliness and broken marriages. Thousands of palm workers have quit their approved jobs, disengaging from the scheme. Palm is dogged by ports off workers being abused, underpaid or housed in substandard, overpriced or overcrowded accommodation. Thousands of palm workers have quit their approved jobs, disengaging from the scheme. This breaches their visa conditions and leaves them vulnerable to exploitation. Drifting from its original mission. Palm has profoundly changed migration between the Pacific and Australia. It brings workers to Australia from countries that have seen minimal migration to Australia since Federation. Despite their geographic proximity, particularly the Melanesian countries Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands and Vanuatu that were sources of labour in the late 19th century, despite their geographic proximity, particularly the Melanesian countries Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands and Vanuatu that were sources of labour in the late 19th century, when indentured South Sea Islanders built Queensland's plantation economy. But the future of palm is not guaranteed. Some Pacific countries, including Papua New Guinea, would like more of their nationals engaged under the scheme, while others worry it creates workforce shortages and disrupts community life. Participation peaked at 34,830 workers in September 2023 and was at 32,365 in November 2025. Numbers in the long-term stream are steady, but fewer short-term workers are being recruited as employers revert to using backpackers, a cheaper, less regulated workforce, for seasonal jobs. So, palm has drifted from its original mission of filling seasonal gaps in the rural economy through annual circular migration to become a labour program for sectors such as meat processing and aged care with a constant demand for workers. In April 2022, 3/4 of all palm workers were in the short-term stream and 1/4 were long-term. Now, more than half of all palm workers hold long-term visas. How to make the scheme work better? The palm scheme changes lives and communities in the Pacific and Australia, often for the better. But its problems must be addressed to realise its potential. Australian employers will turn away from a scheme that is too bureaucratic, expensive or cumbersome. Palm's future won't be secured by burying it under layers of rules and reporting. My report has 10 recommendations to improve palm. These include making it easier for palm workers to change jobs, rather than tying them to a single employer. Simplifying palm scheme rules for employers. Regulating labour hiring at the national level. Giving workers access to Medicare while they're in Australia to stop them missing out on medical attention. And reforming working holiday programs be phasing out the second and third visas offered to backpackers who do work like fruit picking in regional areas. Australia's interest in fostering Pacific development and rivalry with China are added reasons to limiting working holidays and expanding the palm scheme. Instead, palm is a work in progress and will never be perfect. The scheme is shaped by the power differential between Australia and its Pacific partners. And there are tensions between three priorities: being a development program enhancing Pacific well-being, being a labour market program benefiting Australia's economy, and serving a strategic purpose in Australia's rivalry with China. Yet, when it operates well, palm is far more than transactional. Beyond wages earned, jobs filled and diplomatic points scored, it also fosters cultural exchange and personal engagement, binding the peoples of Australia and the region more fully into a Pacific family. Peter Mares is an adjunct senior research fellow, School of Media, Film and Journalism, Monash University. This article was originally published in The Conversation. Who is Israel's President Isaac Herzog and why is his visit to Australia expected to prompt mass protests? Australian foreign policy, The Guardian. When the President of Israel, Isaac Herzog, lands in Australia next week, it will be to a warm welcome from the government and the promise of mass protests from.
Yeah, mass protests, that's what I heard. I heard it on the news as well, and I heard it on the radio, and I heard it everywhere. I heard it.
From demonstrators opposed to his country's war in Gaza. Major Jewish organizations and federal and state governments have welcomed Herzog's visit as a moment of profound significance, but
You fuck cunt. Ah, amigo.
Other groups, including some Jewish Australian organizations, say the president should be barred from entering the country, alleging he has incited genocide against Palestinians. Herzog was invited to Australia by the federal government after the anti-Semitic massacre in Bondi in December, when 15 people were killed by two allegedly Islamic State-inspired gunmen. We need to build social cohesion in this country, Anthony Albanese said, arguing the Israeli president's visit is intended to foster a greater sense of unity. Sign up. Oh, breaking news email. The Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council IJAC says it believes it speaks for the majority of Jewish Australians when it welcomes Herzog's arrival as a Powerful message of solidarity and support following the tragic events at Bondi and the surge of anti-Semitism across the country. But others argue his arrival portends the opposite, that inviting Isaac Herzog will only sow discord. Palestinian groups have called for mass protests against Herzog's visit, and thousands have vowed to march in Sydney in defiance of restrictions imposed by the New South Wales Police Commissioner. Several groups have filed complaints to the Australian Federal Police, saying Herzog must be investigated for inciting genocide in Gaza, an allegation he vehemently denies. The Liberal Jewish Council of Australia (JCA) has described Herzog's invitation as an outrage, saying his presence will fuel the flames of division. Who is Isaac Herzog? For all of Israel's modern history, the name Herzog has been prominent. The current president is the son of Chaim Herzog, who was president from 1983 to 1993. Chaim Herzog's father, Rabbi Yitzhak Halevi Herzog, was chief rabbi of Palestine and then Israel, from 1936 until 1959. A lawyer by training, Isaac Herzog was the leader of Israel's Labour Party and led the Zionist Union coalition that failed to oust Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud. In the 2015 general election, he was chair of the Jewish Agency for Israel before being elected by the Knesset to the largely ceremonial but influential position of president in 2021. Herzog has shifted politically. Once seen as a centrist, Herzog has tended to fall into lockstep with the Gaza policies of Netanyahu's right-wing coalition since becoming head of state. Formerly an advocate for a two-state solution, he has suggested his view has changed since the 7th of October attack. In Davos last year he said it was not realistic at all for Israel to withdraw from settlements in the illegally occupied West Bank. In late 2023, Herzog was pictured signing an Israeli artillery shell being prepared to be dropped on Gaza, writing in Hebrew on the munition, "I rely on you." Last September, Herzog was named by the United Nations Commission of Inquiry in the occupied Palestinian territory as having incited genocide against the Palestine people in Israel's prosecution of its war in Gaza. The commission, which does not speak on behalf of the UN as a whole, cited a speech on the 13th of October 2023. When Herzog said all Palestinians were responsible for the Hamas attack. "It's an entire nation out there that is responsible," Herzog said. "It is not true, this rhetoric about civilians who were not aware and not involved. It is absolutely not true." The commission noted that the president's words were not an express call for genocide, but that, understood in the context of Israeli security forces launching offensives into Gaza, his comments may reasonably be interpreted as incitement to the Israeli security forces personnel to target the Palestinians in Gaza as a group as being collectively culpable. Herzog later qualified his statement, saying, "There are many, many innocent Palestinians who don't agree with the actions of Hamas." But the UN Commission said it viewed that as an effort to deflect responsibility for the initial statement. Israel's foreign ministry has previously rejected the Commission's report as distorted and false. And Herzog has said his comments have been taken out of context, noting he also said Israel soldiers would follow international law. Herzog's initial bellicosity resonated. The slogan, "There are no uninvolved," was subsequently chanted by Israeli soldiers deployed to Gaza. Even written in Hebrew on an IDF watchtower in the West Bank. Healing, or division. Opinion on Herzog's visit has been sharply divided, including within Australia's Jewish community. IJAC has welcomed the visit as an opportunity to strengthen the Australia-Israel relationship through constructive dialogue and renewed engagement. IJAC's executive director, Colin Rubenstein, says he is saddened by attempts to politicize the visit. "Our view is that, after Bondi, Herzog's visit is not only appropriate, but an essential part of the healing process. And we are very confident we represent the overwhelming majority of Australian Jews in saying as much." The Executive Council of Australian Jewry has argued similarly. Its co-chief executive Alex Rivchin has said Herzog's visit would bring tremendous comfort to the families of Bondi victims and, hopefully, a reset of the bilateral relationship. Sometimes it takes a catastrophe, a tragedy, to bring a sense of perspective and clarity and bring two feuding partners together. But Palestinian groups are fiercely opposed to Herzog's visit. The president of the Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network, Nasser Mashni, says Australia's political elite is siding with genocide by welcoming Herzog. "For every Australian who says they believe in democracy, human rights, a fair go, free speech, then you simply must protest Herzog's visit." On Tuesday, the New South Wales Police Commissioner, Mal Lanyon, extended protest restrictions in central Sydney, saying significant animosity around Herzog's arrival in the country was certainly a factor in his decision. Josh Lees, a spokesperson for the Palestine Action Group, said the New South Wales government was ripping up Australians' democratic rights in the service of Israel's ongoing slaughter of Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Protests are also planned in Melbourne and other cities. The JCA has said Herzog's arrival will rightly spark mass protests. Its executive officer, Sarah Schwartz, argues that growing numbers of Jews in Australia and globally oppose the actions of the Israeli government and reject its attempts to speak in our name. "We refuse to be ignored or silenced. Inviting a foreign head of state who is implicated in an ongoing genocide as a representative of the Jewish community is deeply offensive and risks entrenching the dangerous and anti-Semitic conflation between Jewish identity and the actions of the Israeli state. This does not make Jews safer. It does the opposite. Even within the government that invited him, support for Herzog's visit is not universal. The ruling Labour Party's Friends of Palestine group has claimed Herzog works hand in hand with Netanyahu, for whom the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The ICC has not issued warrants for Herzog. The executive director of the Australian Centre for International Justice ACIJ, Rowan Araf, says there is a compelling basis for the Australian federal policy to commence an investigation into Herzog, despite the legal immunity he attracts by virtue of his position as head of state. At a time when the federal government is criminalising hate speech, a person who is alleged to have incited hate to commit the ultimate crime, genocide, must not be allowed to enter Australian territory without facing accountability for these serious allegations. The ACIJ has lodged a formal request with the AFP to investigate Herzog. The AFP says it is reviewing the material. 3 further organisations, the JCA, the Australian National Imams Council and the Hind Rajab Foundation, have filed a complaint to the AFP. The Home Affairs Minister, Tony Burke, and the Attorney General, Michelle Rowland, urging Herzog be investigated and refused entry. To welcome him to Australia would be an affront to justice, a threat to community safety and a violation of Australia's international legal duties, the complaint says. Details of Herzog's itinerary have not been revealed, beyond commitments to meet bereaved families of the victims of the terror attack, as well as the Governor-General and Prime Minister.
Wow, that's a lot to put cloud in your head. Rewind that.
The premiere of Pauline Hanson's
This brilliant device keeps your home cool in summer, even during heat waves and power outages. It's smaller than a lunchbox, cool.
First, let's update the good news for her in the latest opinion poll. This is the first Sky News YouGov Pulse survey, and it confirms that One Nation is outpolling the Liberals and the Nationals.
Even if we put the coalition back together, they still only get 20%, so clearly behind One Nation at 25% and down nearly 12% compared to where they were at the last election.
This is pretty extraordinary stuff, but tellingly, it also shows the potential for the right of centre parties, in my view. If you add together One Nation and the coalition parties, they're polling 45% of the primary vote. That's more than Labor and the Greens combined, which total 43%. So it's not a matter of the nation becoming suddenly more left-wing. It's more a matter of the right of centre being divided and not being able to maximise and concentrate its support. And one of the key issues to tap into is immigration, where One Nation is clear-cut about reducing migration numbers.
Finally, on immigration, a big driver, no doubt, of One Nation support. Well, the numbers here are stark. 3%, increase it a lot, they're saying. 5%, increase it a small amount. 28%, about the same. But here's where the big numbers come in. 21% say, let's increase it by a small amount, and a massive 43% want a big decrease.
So there it is, 64% of voters, almost 2/3 of Australian voters want lower immigration. I bet that doesn't surprise you. Let me bring in Pauline Hanson, who joins us from Canberra. Pauline, I bet it doesn't surprise you either.
No, of course it doesn't surprise me. I've been saying it for decades, Chris, and to listen to this and the polling that's happening, it's encouraging. I thank people for their support, and something has to happen about it. So we're putting pressure on the major political parties to start addressing their policies. And it just makes me, I feel so sick when I hear Labor out there saying, but we are actually controlling immigration numbers now. We've reduced them. after you were the ones that actually had mass migration of 740,000 1 year between 22 and 23, and now you've caused the problem. Now you're taking credit because you're reducing it. Give me a break.
Yeah, it is laughable. There are small reductions from record highs. It's still mass immigration by any examination of the figures and our historical intake. Just on the polls, though, my point about how One Nation and the coalition parties combined have a higher primary vote than the Greens and Labor combined, that kind of demonstrates the mess of politics at the moment, because Labor at 30%, that's a record low for Labor. I'm not suggesting they're going to lose government at the moment. They're benefiting from chaos on the coalition side, on the right of centre side. Isn't that the case?
They're trying to benefit from it, and they're saying the chaos that's happening in the coalition side. And there is chaos, Chris. By all means, there is. But we're still 2 years outside the election. The polls are encouraging, by all means. But you can't count your chickens before they hatch. Let's see what happens at the ballot box. My job now is to encourage people to vote for One Nation, because we are determined to change the policies and mass migration, address cost of living, address climate change, BS that's going on there. All these things impact on our country. I spoke to a couple of Italian men today at the airport, and they said, we came into the country in the 70s and 80s. They said, we actually worked, nothing was given to us. They are fed up with the new migrants come to this country, take advantage of this country, use our laws against us, ourselves, to enhance their own benefits in this country. We've lost the Australian values. And he said, you know what, one fella said to me, he said, my family want to come out to Australia, and I'm telling them, he said, I told them, no, this country's not the country it used to be. This is what you got migrants telling their families want to come here. We are in a hell of a mess in this country. And the young ones, Chris, I've got to tell you this, the younger ones that turned up on Australia Day, they're coming out of the woodwork. They're saying, hey, we understand what this country has become. We don't want any part of it, because this is our country.
A lot of people are worried about it. Now, in the battleground of electoral politics, your key rival often is the Nationals. They see you as a big threat, of course. They're about to have a leadership spill. Colin Boyce is going to challenge David Littleproud. Is he any choice, or are we likely to see someone else put up their hand, perhaps someone like Matt Canavan?
Colin's a nice bloke. He's really involved in his own constituency, and he fights hard for them. I like Colin as a bloke, but he won't win the leadership. Okay, challenging that. He may be actually doing that to get someone else to put up for the leadership against David Littleproud. So I don't know if Matt Canavan will actually take it on. He's not in the lower house. So most of the members of the National Party are in the lower house, whether Matt Canavan can do it from the upper house. But anyway, remember this, the National Party nationally are only on 2%, and they can see the writing on the wall.
Just quickly, Pauline, that your big problem, I would predict, in the lead up to the next election is going to be candidates in the House of Representatives. You're going to have to find a hell of a lot of candidates around the country, and I predict you'll end up with some doozies that will embarrass you.
Chris, we haven't done that in the last couple of elections. We've run the candidates beforehand, but the process that we have now is very good. We've got Barnaby, that's there at the moment. So anyway, Chris, we've got some really, really good candidates. We'll be announcing them in the next few months, who our candidates are. We've got good talent there, people that are, want to make a difference in this country, will fight for it. So don't underestimate myself or the party or our candidates. I tell you what, all of us, or the whole lot of them, the political parties can answer for some of the doozies they've had over the years, I can tell you. And the biggest doozy the Labor Party has at the moment is Chris Bowen. So don't tell me that about my candidates.
Spot on. You're right. They've all had some doozies, but I tell you what, Pauline, you are not a fringe player. At times you have been. But you've ridden the waves high and low in the past. But at the moment, you are a political force to be reckoned with, and I appreciate catching up with you every week. Thanks for joining us.
I have options which I can look at.
Are you thinking of running in a lower house seat?
I have options which I can look at over the next couple of years. But Andrew, it doesn't necessarily have to be me. You know, my side.
What are we going to do with this lady? What are we going to do? She's popular now.
Aren't being, you know, purely because to be Prime Minister, I haven't got an ego that big. My aim is to get what's right for the country. And if it's not me, then I'll ensure that we do have the right person to fill that position. Am I saying One Nation can be government at the next election? I don't know. That's up to the people of Australia, where they cast their vote. But I know that if I don't set my sights on being government one day, why would the people put their trust and faith in voting for us? I have to have confidence and faith in myself and what I'm delivering in policies for the Australian people, first and foremost. So don't say, you know, remember that it was John Gordon that was in the Senate for a while who was Prime Minister of the country. There's nothing in our Constitution that says that the Prime Minister must come from the lower house. So it's all new. This is something totally new. But let's see what happens.
Yeah, but
unless
Gordon
someone wants
quit.
to tell me totally different.
Gordon did quit the Senate.
Correct.
Gordon did quit the Senate to move into the lower house. But if it's not going to be you that would be Prime Minister of a One Nation government, who would it be? I mean, Barnaby's thinking of running in the Senate as well.
Andrew, we're 2 years outside the election. I can't tell you that. You know, this is a juggernaut that's happening at the moment, the rise of One Nation and the support that we're getting. You know, this is something that's just happening, and I will go along with it, and we will have our plans and where we're going to go and who's going to fill these positions. But I can tell you, I do have the nous. I do have the ability to drive this. I've been around in politics for the last 3 decades. Barnaby's been around for a little bit less than that. And we do have people coming on board with experience and knowledge. Don't underestimate myself or the people that I'm collecting along the way to represent the Australian people. You know, all your government departments, everyone's still there. All you need are the people to direct them and change the policies to ensure prosperity for our nation. And that's what I'm going to deliver.
Pauline Hanson, meanwhile, look, your juggernaut is just going, like, I've never seen anything like it, from nowhere, well, almost nowhere to very much somewhere. You're destroying the Liberals and Nationals. They're now desperately trying to join again in a coalition because they know they're being destroyed by you. Do you think that's going to save them from One Nation if they did manage to get together again?
Let me make it quite clear. I'm not destroying them. They are destroying themselves. Since the last election, people have been screaming out to reduce mass migration. Where's the Liberal Party policy? Even with climate change, they couldn't get out and, you know, they say, well, they'll get out of net zero, but they're not getting out of the Paris Agreement. It's all the double speak. People don't trust them anymore. Have a look at the leadership. But that's their issue, not mine. And if I can deliver people a clear option with policies, how to reduce our debt, how to cut back government spending, how to actually give people, you know, the ability to own their own homes, stop foreign investment of our housing, our land, our farms, to represent the Australian people, fly the flag with pride, address their education, get rid of the wokeness that you can be a male and you are a female or you are a male, only two sexes. I'm clear and divisive in what I want for this country. So don't say that I'm destroying them. They've destroyed themselves with all the woke agenda that they've had. But people, even the Labor side, they're coming up to me now and they're saying, we've voted Labor, always have done, but now we're voting One Nation.
You mentioned cutting spending. I mean, spending is out of control. You've seen what's happening with inflation because the government's spending too much. Business leaders are crying for less spending from the government. What would be the three things you'd most like to take an axe to in government spending?
the climate change department, which is costing about $30 billion a year. Then you've actually got the Aboriginal industry is another 30 to 40 billion a year. Treat everyone equally on an individual needs basis without the funding going to it. And NDIS needs a broom through it, a big broom, to stop the rorting and what's happening. That's at the moment about 55 billion a year, expected to grow to 100 billion a year by 2030. These are just starts. Look at your government employees. 80% of new jobs in Australia is coming from government employment jobs. We've got the biggest blown out number of public servants than any country in the world for the population that we have. Andrew, there's so many things we can put a broom through. Look at your social security system, 300 billion a year. That needs a clean up. People have been on the welfare for 20, 30, 40 years, fourth and fifth generation. That needs a big clean up as well. So taxes, I'd like to address the taxation, to reduce taxes for the Australian people, put more money into their pockets, which will create growth.
Pauline Hanson, that's a big agenda. It's amazing what you're achieving in the last year. It's incredible. Congratulations on that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Shen Yun, coming to Sydney Lyric Theatre, March 20th through the 29th.
Have you also talked to Alex Antic, the Liberal senator also in South Australia? He'd be perfect for you and would give you immediately an...
Hello and welcome to the Daily Oz. I'm Zara Seidler.
I'm Billy Fitzsimons.
Since the last federal election, One Nation's popularity has been steadily growing across the country.
A broad idea of kind of how Australians are thinking.
It's just a popularity gauge more than anything. You're right, like you vote in your electorate. That's how we determine who makes up the House of Reps. But it is just...
Who are these people? Oh, going the Daily Australia. Shit.
It's an interesting snapshot into
Pauline
what
Hanson,
the electorate is thinking and feeling at any given time.
And so we've seen kind of, I guess over the past few weeks or so, I have seen comments online about Pauline Hanson potentially being the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we had a chat yesterday about this because, I mean, there were a few things that made me think about this. The first, on Monday, the March for Australia rally, people would have seen photos and images that actually came past our office. So we went out and had a look at it, and I was struck by how many signs there were saying Pauline for Prime Minister. They were...
Here. Today, I'm so proud and honoured to welcome Cory Bernardi as a state leader for One Nation in the up-and-coming state election on 21st March. I've worked beside Cory on the floor of Parliament in the Senate as a colleague, and we have the same views and opinions and what we want to do for our country. Corey taking on the state is a massive move because this state does need help and assistance. We don't have opposition in this country, in the state at all. There is no opposition. And to get good government for the people, you must have good opposition. Corey will bring to the state, for the party, experience, knowledge, understanding. And I think that's a wonderful thing that we can do for the people of South Australia. The services or lack of services that is happening in the state, the high debt that you have, there's no hope for the people, the cost of living, the lack of housing, mass migration, all these things have accumulated and has had an impact and still will continue to have an impact unless we put out decent, common sense policies to turn it around. Yes. I'm warning Labor now. You're on notice. We are coming for your seats and we are actually going to represent the people of this state to give them hope and the future generations hope that they can own a house, hope that they can hold on to a job, hope that they can get that hospital bed when they need it. Nursing homes, it just goes on and on and on. And my main thing is equality for all Australians. And especially with mass migration. If you come to this country, assimilate, become Australian, and join us and be proud of what we are as a nation, not divided. So at this point, I'm going to hand across to my colleague and very warmly welcome Corey Bernardi to address you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today, and may I pay a particular thank you to Senator Pauline Hanson, the founder and leader of One Nation. Pauline has been perhaps, if not one of the most resilient and prescient political figures of our time. Yeah. For 3 decades, she's been advocating the same course, the right course for Australia. She's saying there is something wrong with the legacy political system, where the
Pauline Hanson, pull my pants down, Pauline, reply to that. What did you know? She used to have a word with the chips. She had selling chips, eating a burger or something. Choke on it. It's on, give us the bike, you fucking cunt.
two-party duopoly effectively is working against the people and just for themselves. And the real measure of that is when you examine the problems that people are facing today, particularly here in South Australia. Crime, housing affordability, the lack of industrial progress, opportunity for families, opportunity for our farmers and our fishers. These are the sorts of things by which we measure the success of a state. And yet all the problems we face are a result of the decades of the two-party duopoly, which have been more entrenched about looking after their own survival than the betterment of the voters who put them there. I'm here to tell you today that that's going to change. Our commitment is to common sense policies that give a voice back to every South Australian. Pauline made a comment that there has been no opposition in this state. It's as if the only competition we have between the two major parties is who's going to manage the social, economic and cultural decline slightly less badly than the alternative. We can't accept that anymore. We need common sense policies. We need a commitment to speak up for the things that matter to every South Australian, not to the party insiders or not the machine men. It's all about the people. And that's what I'm absolutely committed to do. I'm delighted to be part of a team that is going to bring a common sense approach and shake up politics in this state. And it needs a shake up, not just because of the problems that we identified, but we've got government and opposition that simply doesn't listen to the people anymore. And if you want a case in point, we've got this green dream going on in this state where One moment Labor is saying we're going to have a $500 million green hydrogen plant, which every credible expert said is not possible, and later on it's abandoned. And then you've got the Liberal Party, who have an on again, off again, on again, I don't know where it is right now, commitment to net zero. The only commitment we have is zero commitment to policy credibility and consistency in this state. That needs to change. And we need our government of the day to listen to the people. And if you want another example of that, the Albanese government's voice to Parliament was absolutely rejected by all states in Australia, and yet suddenly in South Australia, we have an Aboriginal voice to the Parliament. The question is why? It's because Premier Malinowskis didn't want to listen to the Australian people. He tried to front run it, and he's imposed something that no one knows what it's going to achieve. There's no measurable outcomes, and yet it's going to cost the people of this state millions of dollars every single year. Pauline Hanson said we want equality for all Australians. Well, we've got to get rid of these divisive, race-based policies. But the race-based policies, the division, they feed the legacy political system. They want to divide us up into a nation of tribes or of factions or of special victim groups or of special interest groups. The only group that we should be interested in is the group of South Australians, the group of Australians, the people who want to make this state bigger and better, more prosperous. And that's my commitment to the people of South Australia today. We will go into bat for those who are willing to take a risk and start their own business. We will remove red and green and black and blue tape, all sorts of government tape, to support our farmers, our fishers, our families, and those who want to foster free enterprise in this state. We want to make sure that South Australians are not simply a meal ticket or a cash cow for the government of the day. We want to reduce their cost of living by taking away some government fees and charges. We want to make sure the government lives within its means. It's an appalling indictment on what's happening in this state, that we're running up towards $50 billion worth of state debt in just a few years' time. And not one of the legacy parties has put forward an idea or a notion about how it's ever going to be repaid. Instead, we're being distracted with very popular events, but they're costing us a fortune, all while we're building up a debt position that's leading us onto a trajectory just like the basket case of Victoria.
Exactly.
I want better for South Australia. You deserve better for South Australia. And so here's my message to the South Australian people. If you want more of the same, if you want more crime, more social dislocation, higher fees and higher charges, bigger government and
Pack it, stack it, snack it with Primo Stackers.
Don't enter 2026 asking AI random questions like Google. Get AI certified and learn the smarter way.
All right, well, let me go back to the ugly scenes that marred yesterday's Australia Day celebrations. I didn't mention in my opening that along with flag burning and calls for Australia to be abolished, we also saw globalise the Intifada chants, not to mention neo-Nazi rhetoric at anti-immigration events. Joining me now is my panel, former Speaker of the House, Bronwyn Bishop, and former Liberal Senator, Holly Hughes. Welcome to you both. Bronwyn, let me start with you. How do we get to a point where extremists have managed to completely hijack our National Day?
Well, what we've seen is that they've infiltrated organisations which have been around for a long time, and they've taken them over, basically. But let me say this. In 2002, I think I actually introduced a bill to make it a criminal offence to burn the flag or otherwise damage it. And I took a lot of care to ensure that it didn't impinge upon the freedom of communication by consulting the person who originally found that as an implied right. And I was convinced that it was a good piece of legislation. I got to speak to it, but it never got a second reading, and John Howard was the Prime Minister. So I'm interested to see it coming up again, because I think it is an important debate to have. But burning the flag, to me, is a metaphor for burning everything that we have built since 1788. Now, presumably the man who built that flag came in a car or public transport. He ate food that came out of a retail shop, delivered by a truck driven on roads. He apparently went home after that to a house or an apartment. Now, if you burn everything that we have built in this country, then you'd have to burn all that too, and he'd have to go back to living as it was in 1788. I don't think that's what he has in mind.
No, I don't think he does, or any of the other protesters
Absolutely.
that marched against our country yesterday. Holly Hughes, let me ask you, how do we get our country back? Or is this just the depressing new normal?
Isn't it just so upsetting, though, when we consistently see the pulling down of what Australia has been founded on, our values, what has made us one of the greatest nations in the world, yet somehow or other we have this maligned minority in Australia who are determined to absolutely pull everything down. We have everything around the wrong way. When you have people burning our flag and nothing occurs, yet you have people being moved on or what appeared to be assaulted for even carrying our national flag on our national day. I mean, it is just such a sad state of affairs, but this division within our society is just getting worse. I hope it's not permanent, but it's awful to see. And yet under this government, we're seeing it continue to grow and fester.
Go ahead, Brom.
There's one other important point to make. Yes, there are a few thousand people who are protesting against Australia Day, but there were millions celebrating it. I was out on the Pittwater with people who were having a wonderful time celebrating it all over Australia, and yet we didn't see all that. I would like to see more coverage of people celebrating, isn't this wonderful, and less of the people who are seeking attention and coverage.
I think we'd all love that, Bronwyn, but then we had incidences like the one in Perth, where a man has now been charged over what police allege was an explosive device thrown into the crowd at an Invasion Day rally. The device is alleged to have contained ball bearings and screws inside a glass jar that was filled with what police will allege was explosive material. Whatever the device was, it didn't detonate, thank God, but the incident forced thousands to evacuate and sent the CBD into lockdown for hours, with police treating it as a potential mass casualty event. Now, we can't comment any further on the specific incident because, as I said, there's a man charged and awaiting trial. But more generally, Holly, do you ever feel like Australia is becoming completely unrecognisable to the country that we all grew up in?
Well, it is. And you look at what's happening across so many of our major metropolitan cities and the way that these sort of activities are on the increase, that these people think this is an appropriate way to behave. And it would seem to be that the extremists on the far left are just as mad as the extremists on the far right. And, you know, Bronwyn does make the great point that there were millions of Australians who celebrated Australia Day yesterday. And, you know, I think if you need a boost to your soul, get out of the cities and come out into the country, because it is very proudly celebrated as Australia Day. It was beautiful just even driving into town tonight to see how many properties had Australian flags flying off their letterboxes at the front, and the number of vehicles that were driving around with their flags on them, and not in some demeaning way or redneck way. It's actually just pride in our country and an appreciation for the fabulous way of life we've always had. And the fact that this sort of anger is consistently being demonstrated is just not reflective of who we used to be as a nation.
All right, let's play a game, Bronwyn. Let's imagine Prime Minister Bronwyn Bishop, which there should always have been, but let's just
Came
pretend
close.
you had your moment now. What would you do to unite the country? And is it possible to unite the country and to lower tensions and get everybody on the same page? Or are we just stuck with this permanent division now where neither side can talk to each other and we have episodes like the ones we saw yesterday?
Well, to be that Prime Minister, we'd have to displace what's there right now. And that climate that this government has created has led to these divisions. They were not nipped in the bud right back at that demonstration on the steps of the Opera House back after in October 2023. So what I would be doing is I would be doing more than just making the nice odd speech that Mr Albanese is now going to, because he's obviously done polling that said he's not going down too well. And I wouldn't have the henchman of Mr Burke pulling on Holocaust Day the visa at the last minute of someone who was coming here from Israel. So I think what I would be doing is I would be enacting legislation to protect the flag. I would be setting standards that said, this is what Australians do, and I would be listening immigration, and I would be strict about the visas that we issued, not in the way Mr. Burke is doing, but in a way that really recognises what freedom of speech really does mean in this country.
All right, let's talk federal politics then, because obviously leadership ruptions in the Liberal Party continue. So let's cut straight to the chase. Bronwyn, I'll start with you, then I'll come to you, Holly. Should Susan Lee face a leadership spill?
Well, it's not a question of that. You've got people speculating about who might and who mightn't. I think I described the Liberal Party as doing a lot of dithering. They're still dithering. The bottom line is that the Liberal Party needs to have stability, and there needs to be some accommodation made between the parties of the centre-right, the Nationals and One Nation. And if that process doesn't start with building the coalition back together again before we have too many people with too many shadow portfolios, we're in deep doo-doo. So the right has to sort itself out.
So what I hear you saying, Bronwyn, is there should be a leadership challenge, and soon.
No, you're hearing me say, unless the right sorts itself out, there's no point.
Holly, has Susan Lee been given enough time to prove her leadership?
No, not at all. She's been undermined from day one. And to be honest, if these two challenges that are now flouting themselves out and about in the national press expect to have undying loyalty from the party room, which is not what I think many of us have seen be given to Susan since she's taken on the role. And until they can sort themselves out and realise that, Susan is the leader, she should be given a go. She hasn't been. She's done an extraordinary job when you think about what's happened since Bondi and the way that she has actually stood up for Jewish Australians and really led the way. But the boys will be boys, obviously, and they're sort of, having a bit of a contest at the moment, but neither of them are willing to stand up and say, yep, it's going to be me, because they're trying to wheel and deal in the background so there isn't the two of them standing against Susan. But, it'd be interesting to see whether the same loyalty they've displayed to Susan is shown to them.
Holly, I've got to pick you up on something you just said. Boys will be boys. Are you suggesting this is because Susan Lee is a woman?
Oh, no, but it's like a pissing contest, to be perfectly frank, between, who's more conservative and right-wing of the blokes that need to get rid of Susan. And they've been participating in this charade since she took on the leadership. Look, I don't think she's been given a fair go. I don't buy into it's because she's a woman. They just haven't given her a go because it's not them.
All right, I need to get your opinions on one other topic before we go to a break. Kevin Rudd is finishing as our ambassador in the US. There's talk that he's now getting in people's ears, lobbying to become Secretary General of the United Nations, which we know he once aspired to when Turnbull was Prime Minister. So very quickly, Bronwyn, Kevin Rudd running the United Nations, good idea?
Well, he always wanted it, and he's preferable to what's on offer out there.
That's not saying a great deal about what's on offer.
Exactly,
there, is it?
But you've got a government now that would back him in, and I think he's resigning now. He's going to spend the next year campaigning for it.
I think he will. Holly, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the UN, so maybe the UN and Kevin hanging out together is the best outcome for everybody, and we can just officially ignore them both going forward.
I like it. Very well said. Bronwyn, Holly, a delight to talk with you both. Thanks so much for joining me.
Medical weight loss is not cheating. It's actually the smartest way to lose weight. For decades, you've been told that losing weight is all about willpower. But here's the truth. Obesity is...
Okay, there was see. I don't know what to say. Okay, goodbye, intimate sector. Australia mix.